Good morning, everybody. It's March 25th, 2020, and welcome to the Fort Worth Aviation Museum and our fourth edition of Fun with Airplanes, Fun with Aviation, and our walk-around series. Hope you're all doing well. We hope that you're all healthy and safe, and so this is our effort to do a little distance learning and help you understand some of the aviation aircraft that we have here at the museum. So I'm going to turn this around because you really don't need to see me, because today we're going to talk about the OV-10 Bronco. This is an airplane that's near and dear to my heart. This is the first airplane that I flew, tactical airplane that I flew after I received my Naval Aviator wings in 1972. I was assigned to Marine Observation Squadron 2, and we've talked about some of these things in the past. So remember that V stands for fixed wing, and the M stands for Marine, but O is something we haven't talked about. So the O stands for observation. So this is an observation aircraft, which means that it goes out and does work with reconnaissance in terms of finding things and then reporting that back. We used to refer to it as find, fix, and finish, which means we would find a target, we would fix its location, and then using any different means like other aircraft, naval gunfire, artillery, we would finish off the target. We were forward air controllers, which meant that our job was to do those things that I just mentioned: find, fix, and finish. In many cases, we were doing reconnaissance with the airplanes. So what we're going to do is just kind of walk around and talk about the Bronco. It's very unusual. Most of the aircraft in the Navy system and in the Air Force system come from within the system itself, from NavAir or from the Air Force. In this particular case, two Marine majors, Bill Beckett and K.P. Rice, in a kitchen, came up with a concept for an airplane to be observation, to work with directly with the commanders in the field, and to be able to assist them and support them. The original design that they came up with was actually quite a bit smaller than this. It was about half the size of this airplane. But as the services finally relented in accepting the airplane, they put more and more tasks and capabilities on it, so the airplane grew in size. So we've got two cockpits, pilot in the front, and from the Marine Corps, most of the time we had an aerial observer who was an artillery officer in the back seat. I'm going to show you the cockpits in a little bit, but we're going to show you some of the other items. We've talked about pitot-static tubes. This is the pitot tube, the ram air pitot tube on the OV-10 Bronco. In fact, we used to have a sign that we would take with us in the Marine Corps to air shows, and the sign said, "No, that's not a machine gun, it's a pitot-static tube. No, this is not a P-38, it's an OV-10 Bronco. Yes, this is the airplane that's been flying over your house." We showed you the angle of attack indicator on one of the other aircraft, and this is the one on the Bronco. It moves normally, it doesn't on these. And there's the rescue. There's the rescue arrows that we talked about before to help people be able to get into the aircraft in the event that they need rescue. This is one of the sponsons on the airplane. Sponson is just a protuberance on the airplane. It's a storage on the airplane. In this particular case, it allows us to have multiple stations underneath the airplane for external stores. Now in the Marine Corps, what we normally carried here was a drop tank in the center, a 150-gallon drop tank in the center, sometimes larger, and rockets on the other pods. We would sometimes carry a 20-millimeter cannon on the center line, and sometimes we would use flares and things. You can see on the O2 over here, there's a rocket pod under the wing. We carried that most of the time, either 7 or 19-shot rocket pods. Turboprop engines, a T-76 or a TPE 331 for the people who are familiar with the civilian version. And Eric Dorsey's telling us that his Bob Skip Hurley flew them in Vietnam, and that he was also a flight instructor. So glad to have you with us today, Eric. So you'll notice the wing is pretty fat. This wing it's not a jet wing. It's not supersonic by any stretch. It's a subsonic airplane, way subsonic. Max speed 350 knots in a dive, and it's a big fat wing, so it can carry a lot of gas. Straight wing, So it's got a lot of stability. It's got some really interesting features that we're really not going to be able to show you because they're up in the top of the wing. But that's the aileron. And the aileron on this side and on the other side, there are also little spoilers up inside the wing on the top. And they're kind of like a half circle. And they would pop up on the opposite side of the wing as you would turn, which gave us a really, really short turn radius. At maximum knots, we could turn the airplane 180 degrees in about 500 feet. I don't think you're going to be able to see them up there. They don't pop up unless the control surfaces have been deflected. And let's see. You'll notice the landing gear looks a little bit different. It's sometimes referred to as a knuckled landing gear or a dragging landing gear. This was done because the airplane was designed to be able to be used in any kind of a field, prepared or unprepared. So big balloon tires so you could land on soft surfaces, in the grass, on the sand, any number of different places. It's very, very much built to be a utilitarian airplane. So here's the tail booms. There are two of them, and they are identical. They're identical so that they can be interchanged if need be. So here again, we've talked about the markings on the tails. Number up at the top, 55426, that's the bureau number, but we would put a 1 in front of it like you see down lower. You'll see a couple of horseshoes. I have the distinction of saying that Modex uniform is something that I designed for the squadron at VMO2 in about 1974. The CO at the time, Jim Farber, wanted to do something distinctive, so we did a centennial paint scheme that I came up with on the airplanes, but we also changed the Modex to uniform. Wasn't easy to come out of your mouth on a radio, but it made for an interesting tail flash. And we also started to send out branding kits when we go on cross countries with the crews, so that they could essentially take a stencil and spray paint the double horseshoes on airplanes. Sometimes referred to putting ZOTs on the airplanes. So you'll notice it's a high tail, and this was by design for a number of different reasons. Again, this is a utilitarian airplane. It was designed for the counterinsurgency warfare back in 1964. First flight was in 68, I believe it was. But this was designed for a number of different reasons. One is that a 6x military vehicle could back up underneath this wing and go to the cargo compartment, and it had a level surface to move things off of the truck into the airframe. The other thing is that when this airplane was disassembled, the entire airplane could fit in the back of a 6x, along with all the materials it needed to be able to reassemble it. I'm going to show you inside the wheel well here a little bit. We used to go to Fallon, Nevada a lot and control airplanes out on the ranges there. And one of the things we had to do in Fallon every morning when we were doing our walk around is remember to look for snakes, because they like to hide in here. The box up there in the top is the battery box. Became very handy at times because this airplane had a lot of really unique features. One of them was if you couldn't get the airplane started, you could take a battery out of another airplane if you were with it, put it in that box, start the airplane. There were also a couple of other things, and I'll show you that in a second. That lump on the top of the airplane is from the Desert Storm era, and that's where what referred to as the disco light was up there. That was a reflector for infrared. Now this airplane, the paint scheme that we've got is kind of a lizard paint scheme, and this is the paint scheme that this airplane was in when it retired in 1992. It's one of my favorite paint schemes, but this particular airplane wore this when it was decommissioned. A couple of secrets of the OV-10. Here's one of them. This little door, when we open this, shows you a thing that says utility power and then starting power. This airplane had the ability, if you had the cables with you, you could stick it into utility power, run it over to another airplane that had a dead battery, and you could start that airplane. Or on the other case, you could run a cable from the other airplane that was running, put it in here, and be able to start this airplane. So that was very, very interesting. Okay, one of the secrets of the OV-10 is the cargo compartment. Now the cargo compartment here was used for a lot of different things. Primarily it was used to be able to, it was designed to be able to carry 2 stretcher cases along with a corpsman. They would take out the back seat so the corpsman could sit in the back and tend to the people who were there. The other thing is that we carried jumpers in here a lot. There'd be a jump master in the back up there where you see those tanks, and then they would sit up there, and we would put anywhere from 3 to 4 jumpers. Now we'd take the door off, so the jumpers would sit on the edge of the cargo compartment, and when we'd get over a target, we'd hit the light up in the front of the airplane in the cockpit, and it would be the jump light. Initially, when I was doing this in the early 70s, the jumpers wouldn't always get out when you wanted them to. If they didn't see the target down below their legs, they wouldn't jump. So we had to devise a different way of being able to get them out and get the recon team where they needed to be. So it was pretty simple. We'd just go into a zoom climb, and they'd fall right out. I've got a book in here that I wanted to show you a little bit about. Some of you may or may not be aware of what this is, and it's referred to as the NATOPS manual. All Navy, Marine Corps, and Coast Guard aircraft have a NATOPS manual, which is Naval Air Training Operations Procedures and Standards. And this book tells you how to operate this airplane. As we used to always say, that all of the rules in that book, or the guidance in that book, were all written in blood, because they tended to be from accidents and incidents and things like that. The Air Force has something similar. It's called a -1, and it's very similar in its purpose. Now, this is a STOL aircraft, which means short takeoff and landing aircraft. Oops, tripping over an old stump here. Which means it's designed for short takeoff and landing. Now, NATOPS said that if full STOL operations were only to be used when the welfare of the crew was not at stake. So we never did a lot of that, but the airplane could land and take off in less than 1,000 feet, even less sometimes, depending on the load of the airplane. With the centerline tank, we could go out and fly for about 5 hours, which was longer than anybody wanted to sit in the cockpit on this airplane, I can assure you that. But the A7s, as I mentioned the other day, could stay out on a target a long, long time. Our plane captain, I want to take note of this. Our plane captain is Anna Rico. Anna and Nick Rico were very big supporters of what we do here. Last year they both passed away, which was really unfortunate, because they were such great people to have around. To honor Anna, we have her name on this OV-10, primarily because when it came time to paint airplanes several years ago, we were finding we were having a lot of difficulty with the equipment we had, and Anna very graciously provided the funds we needed to buy a better spray rig, so that these airplanes, in some cases, it takes weeks or months to get them ready to paint, but we can sometimes paint them in a day. Now I'm going to show you, here's how you get in this airplane. No ladders. You just step up on these steps, and then you climb into the airplane. There is no graceful way to get in or out of this airplane. This is not like the World War II airplanes where you jump in the cockpit and go fly. You climb in. Once you're in, it's okay, but until you get there, it's a different thing. A couple of things. The ejection seat here in the front, you'll notice up on the top a couple of protuberances that stick up, and we referred to those as horns. When you ejected from this airplane, the canopy didn't go off on its own. You went up through the canopy, and those points on the ejection seat were there to shatter the glass so that you could get up and get out. Now, it had a 0-0 seat, which meant that if you had no airspeed level, you could get out of the airplane and be safe. However, if the nose gear or one of the landing gears dropped off of a runway or something like that, you were no longer in the envelope. So it was you had to be very careful about that, always. But the aerial observer in the back seat, the parachutes were attached to different sides of the seat, so that when they go up out of the airplane, one would go to the right, one would go to the left. So this is what the cockpit and instruments look like on the OV-10. We got a bunch of empty holes here that we're still attempting to fill, but this is what we've got so far. So this is the front seat. Again, it's all analog. It's all It's all steam gauges, as we like to say about them. In the back seat, it's slightly different. Now, the back seat was not intended to be a pilot seat. There's instrumentation back here, but the aerial observer was not intended to be a pilot, although he could do some flying. But a lot of the AOs that we flew with carried an expandable pointer or stick, so that if the pilot became incapacitated, they could reach all the way up forward and change the radios. Change the radio settings so that they could communicate with somebody. I don't know that we've got one in here, but I got a story I want to try to tell you. In between the seats, and I don't know that we've got one there, we had relief tubes. And so those were exactly what you would think they were for, in case you had to relieve yourself in flight. 5 hours is a long time. And one day, if you wanted to use them, you'd always tear off a little piece of paper and see if it would suck it out, because otherwise you might get a surprise that you didn't want. But at any rate, took one of these to an air show one day up at El Toro, and the school kids were coming out to see the airplanes. And so I was talking to a school teacher, and there were a couple of kids in the airplane, and one of them was yelling, "Can you hear me?" And the one in the back seat was going, "No, talk a little louder." And he'd say, "Can you hear me now?" And he'd go, "No, talk a little louder." And I was wondering what was going on. Turned around and looked, and the kid in the front seat had the relief tube stuck over his mouth and was yelling into it, "Can you hear me?" And the kid in the back seat had the relief tube over his ear, and he was going, "No, talk a little louder." So that's one of the stories. Now, one of the things I wanted to show you that's really important about this airplane, the design that Beckett and Rice did for us was just really something. If you notice the curve on the canopy, it's round. And when you are in the cockpit, and this is an unair-conditioned cockpit, by the way, you'll notice there's a little door right in there in front of the window. We had all of the air conditioning that you had on a 53 Buick. That would pop up and give you what you needed. So at any rate, in the cockpit, and it being curved like that allows you to be able to literally look over the side of the airplane and see underneath it. So this airplane had amazing visibility. So right next to us, we have an Air Force model, and we're going to go over and walk over and take a look at this one for a second. You'll notice it's a little different. It's gray. One of the things I want you to see is the wing. If you'll notice, the top of the wing is white. In Vietnam, the Marine airplanes also had a white wing top, and that was there so that the aircraft above you, who were going to be friendlies, would be able to see you. There are other ways for them to be able to see you also. We had a little smoke generator on the airplane, and you'd press the button and it would put a little oil into the exhaust, and you'd get a puff of smoke so that they could identify where you were at that point also. Otherwise, the airplanes are identical. You can see a little bit better a rocket load here. These are 19-shot rocket pods. We carried a variety of different types of rockets, and these are 2.75-inch rockets. They're dumb weapons. You point them where you want them, you pull the trigger, and then you hope that they get there. And some of these, the bigger warheads would be referred to as the HE, or the high explosive ones. And the smaller one back there would be a Willie Pete or a white phosphorus round. We did those more than anything because we used them to mark targets. We'd find a target, we'd shoot a rocket down on the ground, hit the ground, it'd be a big puff of white smoke. And from that position, we could tell the airplanes where they needed to go with their attack runs to hit the target. Now, if we did it correctly, you'd be able to tell somebody, "Hit my smoke." That was everybody's goal, was to be able to tell somebody, "Hit my smoke," as opposed to saying, "Go right 100 meters from the smoke and there's your target." When we were doing the forward air control missions, and the Air Force did these also, we most of the time operated in what we refer to as a racetrack pattern. If you were in what's referred to as a permissible air area to control air, which meant that you could get into a racetrack's shaped pattern, and that you would fly in the OV-10 inside the racetrack area. You would pick up an airplane at its high point as it would roll into the target. You would be sure that it was looking at the target because you'd ride down on his wing, fly right down along with the jet on his wing. And when you were sure that he had the target in sight, you'd tell him they were cleared hot, which meant that they were cleared to drop ordnance. So let's see a couple of other things here. The names on the airplane.